Alright, so welcome back to Aussie Arvos. Today, we're at Goody's garage and we've got Dan and his GQ Patrol. So, we're actually putting it on the dyno today. So, Dan's planning to sort of tune up the Carby, just see what it's sort of running at, see what sort of figures we're getting. So, I'll ask Dan. He's pretty busy getting the car ready, but we'll go see sort of what figures he's chasing and what he thinks it's going to get. So, Dan, before we run, what sort of numbers do you think? What are you guessing it's going to make?
I hope 90.
90.
Yeah. Alright, now, before everyone jumps out and says, why are you dynoing a stock car? It's not stock, alright? It's got aftermarket gas on it that was put on in the 90s, and anyone who's dealt with that in the past knows that it's not done to Nissan standards. So, why are we dynoing a relatively stock GQ Patrol? Well, I had the Carby rebuilt as it was intermittent on petrol. It had run fine on gas, but on petrol there seemed to be an issue with idle where sometimes it'd work perfectly, then it'd fail. I played around with that a lot before I eventually sent that to get rebuilt, and it's all back together. It was running fine, but it was anyone's guess what AFR ratios it was actually running at. So to work that out, of course, we're going to put it on a dyno. Now, Eric's a mate of mine. He tuned my VH. He is a wizard when it comes to carburetors, and I haven't known or seen anyone else to do the sort of things he does. So of course that's where I went. Eric runs a shop called Goody's Garage in Bayswater. So let's head over there now. We're going to chuck the GQ on the rollers, see what sort of numbers we can push, and hopefully get the air fuel ratios both on gas and on petrol to where they need to be.
Flick it over to LPG, see what difference that makes.
Considering that, it actually goes pretty well on the road. That's a bit of a dreary number, isn't it? I said 90. We have about 60 on petrol and 55 on gas.
So we've got our base numbers, now we're trying to improve on that essentially.
Basically, well, we're not really looking for numbers at the moment as much as setting mixtures.
Right, okay.
So we'll start with mixtures and then move to timing, and then we'll look for numbers. So what does Carby tuning involve? Or Carby dyno tuning, I should say. Well, in this form, it's pretty stock motor and it is a factory carburetor. So there wasn't any real need to go changing your main jets or anything like that. Now, when Eric tuned my 350 Holly on my VH, of course it was a different story because that's a Carby that's a generic carburetor on a motor that's had a fair bit of work done to it. So things are completely different to how they would be from factory. Main jets are different, power valve, everything's set for that motor now. This was fairly well in tune to start with, so the only difference why I wanted to get it tuned is because of the gas mixer. Now, standard with a carburetor version of a TB42, you're running basically an oval shaped air cleaner, straight through that, straight into the top of the Carby. With the gas mixer on top, I obviously changed the air filter, which is no crazy big deal, just to accommodate the gas mixer. Now the mixer is fitted to the top of the Carby, and what you're changing there is you're changing the way the air flows through the Carby. Not a crazy deal, but for reliability reasons I wanted to know that this wasn't running lean, and for fuel economy that it wasn't running rich. Petrols are essentially the opposite of diesels when it comes to this. You run a diesel with too much fuel, it'll get hot. You run a petrol with too much fuel, it won't get hot. It'll just be uneconomical. But you run it lean, as in not enough fuel, it will start to get hot. And when I say hot, I don't necessarily mean coolant hot, although that will happen. I mean pistons, spark plugs, valves, engine internals running hot, which can obviously cause damage. So in order to make sure everything was where I wanted it to be, yeah, we dropped it on the dyno and dialed everything in.
See what happens when you pull that diaphragm up, what it'll do is lift this.
Yep.
So that it breathes.
Without going through the gas
exactly
mixer.
right.
Yeah,
and
right.
Normally, like, so I'm going to do a pass with this off.
Yep.
Just because we're going to service this and I'll teach you how to do that.
Okay.
We're going to run it without the air cleaner on.
Yep.
That's not completely fair, but it will give us an idea as if that is acting as a restrictor.
Yep.
Do you remember what your VH numbers were?
The VH when we baselined it was 90.
Right.
And
oh,
it was
wow.
120 after the tune, or around 120.
Yeah, right.
But its power curve is sort of like, see how this sort of pretty much comes over the top. That it was just, so this is peaking in power there. That's K's an hour.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
Which will be in, I think that'll be running in third when he's doing it.
Yeah.
But that's, like, I was quite happy with how it went on the street. Considering that's the numbers we're looking at, that's surprising how much fun you can have with 60 kilowatts.
Yeah.
So the other question people ask a lot is EFI or Carby? Goods, bads, pros, cons. To me, you're not really gaining massive power changing to EFI. You may gain a little, but more so what you're probably gaining is easy starting in the morning. With a Carby, it's got an auto choke, and it's now that it's dialed in, it's relatively good. It's not bad. It was horrible when I first got the car. It had run really, really rich, as in black soot rich, which is pretty bad for a petrol. And then it'd take a long time for the auto choke to come off, as in it'd have to idle for a few minutes before it'd be drivable. Now you can start it and just about drive straight away. Now with EFI, what you're probably gaining is that you can, if I start this cold, being that I'm a mechanic and have mechanical sympathy, I wouldn't do it anyway, but a lot of people do. Start this cold and just boot it straight away, it will want to cough and splutter. It doesn't run perfect. Most people who have driven a Carby car will understand that. With EFI, you're sort of solving that issue because it's tuning based on the actual fuel that the motor's burning at the time at the temperature it's at. It's a fair bit more accurate in that way. A Carby isn't, I wouldn't say, it's probably not less economical than EFI, maybe slightly if you're mashing at the pedal all the time and that sort of thing, but it's not major. And when you're looking at a TB42, that tiny bit of economy is not really going to save you. So yeah, so put it on the dyno to dial in the Carby with the gas hat on it, because being that it was a gas install back in the day, I'm sure it's never been adjusted to suit. They basically just, when they did these installs, bang the mixer on top of the Carby, plumb the gas system up, make sure it runs, and that's about it. That was for a lot of, I mean, there were obviously better places, but for a lot of the places doing installs back then, that was about the extent of the work. Judging by the wiring under the dash, they weren't exactly particular. I've had to redo all that just to bring it up to a standard where I'm happy with it. So I've thought I'd better check over everything else they've done as well. So the gas mixer is adjusted relatively simply. There's only an adjustment for idle down the center of it and an adjustment for full throttle right here on top of it. That's relatively easy, and you can road tune things, but dyno tuning just is an easier way. It's more accurate. I mean, you're loading up a car as you would be on the freeway, just it's stationary, so you can be standing right here while it's under full load. Yeah, EFI versus Carby. If it was a simple bolt-on, bolt-off thing, I'd change it over to EFI. But being that it's intake, it's not a major job, but it is a fair bit of work and more electrics that I don't really need or want. The Carby, while it's working, is relatively simple, self-contained. I guess there's a couple of wires going to this one for the auto choke, a couple for it's got a fuel shut-off solenoid, and that's about it. That's a fuel line and a throttle cable. Real simple, and it just works. So yeah, that's why I thought, well, we'll just get this running at a reliable and good state where it's going to be good on fuel and maybe have a little bit more power, and yeah, we'll go from there. But contrary to what everyone probably thought looking at the thumbnail, this isn't just us going, we're going to make an extra 60 kilowatts, putting it on the rollers, as everyone thinks. As I said, it's a stock motor, so let's get into it. I'm not chasing numbers. Like I said, the engine, other than the gas mixer, the motor's completely stock.
Yeah.
The only reason I'm really doing this is because with the mixer, as Eric was saying before, you're upsetting the airflow through the Carby. So I want to make sure that on both fuels, it's happy. Because
you're trying to get it. You're trying to get a bit better on gas or petrol, or even?
Probably even.
Yeah.
Probably 50-50. I mean, it's never going to be perfect, but as close as we can get it, that it's going to be happy on both fuels. I think this setup originally was more set to sort of gas, but I want it as in, I don't think the fact that that's why the Carby had issues when I bought it. I don't think it had been on petrol for years.
Yeah.
I want it more so if we go somewhere, gas is sort of getting harder to find. Not hard to find, but
you're not going to find out new to the track.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so you're going to want to.
I'd like to have it reliable, drivable on both fuels, so that I can run it out of gas and have a couple of jerrys of petrol and keep going.
And is this all for measuring temps?
That's measuring timing.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So that's a timing light. That's just that's a vacuum line.
Yep.
For the readout on the computer.
Yep.
Let's do one more as it sits. tweaks now?
He's dropped a bit off because it had crazy timing. Like,
Yeah, right.
I had measured the total. So basically you've got typical advance, so as the RPM picks up, the timing comes up, and it had heaps in it.
Right.
So it's made more with less advance, so...
Yeah, and again, see, I started later, that's why this is lower.
Okay.
So what I'm looking for is I'm trying to get the balance between it not kicking down, so it's right on top of the converter.
Yep.
It still has that thing going on there.
Yeah.
This, turn that back so that the top center lines up at 0.
You see that? That last one?
Yep. Heaps more torque off the back.
But see how it hasn't break? Our torque curve's broader.
Yep.
And its peak is still up there. I reckon if I put another 2 in it, this will come down and that'll start to fall. I'm going to leave it where it is.
Yep.
So I reckon that's at its optimum.
Yep.
Just shut it down now and I'll show you how to service that thing.
Yep. That's what's flowing gas.
Yes, exactly right. So, well, it's a relatively old diaphragm, but it's not petrified. It's not misshapen. It's got a little bit of discoloration, but it's not bad. So we'll clean that because contaminants is what creates irregularities too. Yep. That should sit something like that.
Yep.
All right, you can put it back together. If you ever have to adjust the idle mixture, ½ inch, take the plug out.
Yep.
And I said, literally, if you have a turn in it, I'm going to make it ridge.
So shout out to Eric from Goody's Garage. As I said before, the guy is a wizard with carburetors. Yeah, he's taught me a fair bit and I know he knows so much more. Always a really helpful guy, and it's just one of those trades that it's just hard to find someone who can tune Carbys anymore. It's hard enough to find someone who's good with dyno tuning in general, but I think Carby tuning is something that's sort of being left out, being left behind. I mean, it's sort of a bit of a dying art, and it's something that not many people can do, and even fewer people can do to the standard that he can. So big shout out to him for giving us a hand with that. As I said, tuned my VH in the past. The guy knows what he's looking at.
Real curve, that's our gas, that's our petrol. So we've narrowed the gap. So we've now got just about 63 kilowatts on petrol, and we've got 58 on gas. We'll do that properly in a minute. That's what
Close between petrol and gas, isn't it? That's pretty close.
it's getting better.
That's sweet. So yeah, the gas, well, 10 degrees seems to be pretty happy for both of them, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I think any more than that, it's just hurting itself.
Yep.
And it needs all the help it can get.
Like I said, looking at those numbers on the rollers, it's surprising how well it goes on the road. I mean, it's not a race car, but for an old four-wheel drive, it's decent.
It takes a good ride and see what it feels like.
Alright, so big numbers, as you've seen, 63 kilowatts on petrol and 59 on gas. I know what you're thinking. How do I manage to keep the wheels on the ground? It's a lot of car, trust me. But surprisingly, for some, I actually thought it had more power than that, and not just because the internet said so or anything like that. It just feels like it has more than that. It's probably partially due to the fact that being a fairly decent displacement motor, it'll have a fair bit of torque, and the auto helps with getting off the line a bit easier with torque multiplication rather than a manual. It definitely feels like it's got more power than that, but the numbers don't lie. That's what it's got at the wheels. So am I happy with that? I'm happy to drive it. I love it. It goes good on the road, it's reliable, and it's not slow. Like, it'll hold 80 or 100 up a hill, no worries. I mean, I said to Patrick after we did the dyno run, if that's got 60 kilowatts, I'd love to put the nav on the rollers and see what it's got. Probably 25, 30 maybe. But But yeah, I'm happy with it for now. Would I ever go for more power? Is something that everyone wants to know, because everyone wants more power, let's be honest. I'm not going to say no to that. I'm going to keep that open. Maybe. I know that if I did, it'd probably be something else going in here rather than throwing parts at a TV. I'm not saying I don't like the motor, I'm just saying from a financial point of view, you can make more power cheaper with other things. Anyway, so yeah, but for now, very happy with the TB, happy with those numbers, and more so just to have the actual AFR ratios both on petrol and gas in a safe state where I'm not going to be burning up a motor. So yeah, that's about it, guys. Hope you enjoyed the big dyno runs and pushing big numbers, and we'll see you out on the tracks.